2 very long, emotional weeks working at the New York City Medical Examiner's Office, Alicia, with little to no sleep, but at the same time knowing that the work her and her team was doing was vitally important. Dr. Pamela Hamill of Grosse Pointe works with the Disaster Mortuary Operational Response Team. It's also known as DMORT, and in the hours following September 11th, she got a call that she was needed in New York City. Dr. Pamela Hamill is a forensic dentist, and her first experience working with DMORT was after Flight 255 at Metro Airport, so she knew in some ways what she'd be up against. But the volume, she says, was something she'd never seen.
It was endless. The morgue line was endless to bring me remains, and it was also the level of devastation.
Body bag after body bag. As a shift commander, it was her and her team's job to conduct post-mortem dental profiles, collecting everything from teeth to facial bones, ultimately in an effort to identify the victims, a tall order given the conditions at Ground Zero.
The respect that people had, all of us had, for the dead is just immense.
She remembers how the remains of those believed to be first responders were covered with an American flag, and even in the midst of the chaos, were personally escorted by another service member to each station at the morgue. She bonded with a lot of strangers over those 2 weeks working at the morgue in New York City, including a police officer escorting someone in a body bag.
He stood up and he hugged me. I'll never forget the hug, and he just sobbed on my shoulder. And he said, "That's my brother." And I didn't know whether it was his sibling or his fellow officer. And I didn't ask, but I just said, "It's okay, you keep crying. You're doing a good job, you know."
Fellow Michigander Patrick Anderson also has a personal connection to September 11th. He's a survivor.
I ended up escaping, running out literally as the second plane came right over my head into the building that I was leaving.
Some of the firefighters who saved his life never made it home themselves. 5 years after the attacks, he founded the Michigan Remembers 9/11 Fund, which to date has helped identify and share the stories of 42 Michiganders lost that day.
We wanted to record contemporaneously what actually happened, who was actually there, and including tales of heroism.
He expects the stories and list of names will continue to grow. Just this week, forensic scientists were able to identify 2 more victims of the attacks. Dr. Hamill says new technology is making further DNA matching possible.
They have over 22,000, I believe, different cases that have some sort of bones in them or something that might, a tooth maybe, that has DNA, and they're still testing them all.
Now, as of this week, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in New York City has identified 1,647 victims. Still, though, and let this sink in for a minute, 40% of Ground Zero victims have yet to be identified 20 years later. Reporting live this morning, Jen Shantz, 7 Action News.